Hey everyone! If you enjoyed this video, the full version is available on Patreon. I'll be uploading all my content there going forward.
Chapter 1. In the year 737 of AJ, on Planet Vegeta. Whoa! Whoa! The piercing cry of the baby was like a sledgehammer, repeatedly striking the nerves of Raleigh, who had just fallen asleep after staying up all night playing games. He waved his hand irritably, muttering under his breath, "Damn it, whose brat is this, can't anyone discipline him?" As he rubbed his eyes and opened them, the unfamiliar ceiling startled him. Immediately afterwards, Raleigh found himself inside an oxygen chamber. Holy crap, where did this thing come from? His gaze swept downwards, and the sight of that chubby baby hand, whose fingers hadn't even fully grown, made his breath catch in his throat. What? The cries surged again, and the first thought that exploded in Luo Li's mind after years of reading online novels was reborn. He shook his head and finally saw where he was. The nutrient capsule, about the size of a crib and gleaming with a cold light, resembles a tiny bed made of an upside-down glass bottle. Are we really going to kill him? An unfamiliar male voice suddenly came from outside the cabin, tinged with hesitation. Raleigh looked up abruptly and saw several men with black hair standing on end like steel needles, dressed in dark combat suits, who had already surrounded the nutrient tank. Raleigh's pupils suddenly contracted. That outfit, it's like a Saiyan from Dragon Ball? There's nothing we can do, it's the king's order. Another Saiyan's voice came through, devoid of any warmth. He looked at Raleigh inside the cabin and sighed, what a pity. His power level was over 10,000 right after he was born. Now, without any training, he has reached 70,000 at the age of 3. If he is properly trained, he can definitely become Prince Vegeta's most capable right-hand man. Left and right hands? Bullshit. A man nearby sneered, his eyes full of disdain. If Broly really grows up, he'll probably take the prince's place, and then we Saiyans will have to change our king. Broly. The name struck Raleigh like a thunderbolt. He was jolted. Was it the legendary Super Saiyan Vegeta had referred to? The green-haired Saiyan with the flashing Super Saiyan form? That's enough. The most burly middle-aged Saiyan in the crowd said in a deep voice, the king's orders must be obeyed. Before he finished speaking, the tall Saiyan raised his hand, and a dazzling golden light wave condensed in his palm. He stared at Broly inside the cabin, his tone icy, don't blame me, it's the king's order. Broly's mind went completely blank, damn it, I'm going to die right after transmigrating. In life-or-death situations, the body reacts before the mind. He subconsciously raised his palm, which was only the size of a billiard ball, and a ball of dark green light, as dark as ink, suddenly exploded, carrying an innate and untamed power, and crashed hard into the golden light wave. Boom! The two energies collided violently at the hatch of the nutrient chamber. The golden and green flames instantly engulfed the small space. In less than half a second, the dark green light wave surged back with overwhelming force, completely engulfing the bodies of the 3 adult Saiyans as they stared in disbelief. The aftershocks blasted through the ceiling of the nursery, and rubble mixed with dust rained down like a storm. Boom! The loud noise shook the entire building, and the baby's cries next door were heart-wrenching. Broly crawled out of the hole in the nutrient pod, glanced at the baby lying next to him, crying his eyes out, and couldn't help but open the lid and pat him on the shoulder. Damn it, stop crying. He glanced down at the 3 Saiyan corpses on the ground, each only half dead, and scratched his head hard. This is a big problem. As a hardcore otaku, he had certainly watched Dragon Ball, but he couldn't remember the details anymore. In the original story, Broly did indeed escape from Planet Vegeta with his father, but he had no idea exactly how they escaped. What happened? Kakarot, are you all right? A hurried female voice suddenly rang out, and a petite woman dressed in light combat gear rushed in. Although she was also wearing armor, she was petite and lacked muscle, clearly not the type to excel in combat. Upon seeing the mess in the nursery, Jin's expression froze instantly, her eyes filled with bewilderment. Jin, what's wrong? Another man followed them in, his face was almost identical to that of the future Goku. It was Badak. Jin snapped out of her daze, rushed to her son's nutrient pod, and picked up Kakarot, who had a large bump on his head and had already fainted from fright. She looked at the three corpses on the ground, their upper bodies gone, then at Broly, who was staring at her with wide, round eyes, and was completely dumbfounded. What happened? Never mind. Bardock said in a deep voice, a hint of wariness hidden in his eyes, if anyone else sees this, Kakarot will definitely be affected. We need to move the plan forward and send him away. He had long sensed Frisia's murderous intent towards the Saiyans, and after the mission was over, he discussed with Jin that they should send their youngest son away on a spaceship. I originally planned to wait a couple of days to choose a stable planet, but it seems there's no time now. Hey! Seeing the couple about to leave with Kakarot in their arms, Broly panicked. He could only make babyish babbling sounds with his mouth open, but in his heart he was screaming, "Take him with you, but take me with you too." Bardock turned around, his brows furrowing even more deeply. His face, so identical to Kakarot's, was now filled with a terrifying ferocity. He said coldly, "This kid's too noisy, he'll attract others. Take care of him." "Fuck you!" Broly cursed inwardly. Damn it, is this guy serious? In his rage, he raised his hand, intending to condense another wave of light to turn Bardock into 2.5 billion Argentine pesos as well. "Don't frighten the child." Jin glared at her husband, then reached out and pulled Broly into her arms, quickly walking towards the door. This child was born on the same day as Kakarot, what a coincidence. Anyway, giving one away is the same as giving two away, so let's take him with us. Bardock didn't argue, but followed closely behind his wife, his eyes scanning the corridor warily, afraid of being discovered. Broly breathed a sigh of relief. Although it's different from the original story, at least he survived. Soon, the two arrived at the spaceship area with two 3-year-old children. Just as Jin was about to cram Broly and Kakarot into the same spherical spaceship, Bardock suddenly spoke up, "Send them separately. Send this kid to another planet." Jin was taken aback. "Hey? Why? Isn't it good to have company? Saiyans don't have the concept of comrades." Bardock rolled his eyes. "It's good enough that we don't fight while we're on the same planet." Jin didn't argue further and put Broly into another spaceship next to her. With time running out, she could only set a random coordinate on the spot. 2 minutes later, the two spherical spaceships slowly rose into the air, leaving trails of light as they pierced the dark red sky of Planet Vegeta. Jin cupped her hands around her mouth, looked up and shouted, "Take good care of yourself, Kakarot, and you little unknown one, grow up healthy too." The next second, the two spaceships disappeared into interstellar dust in completely different directions. Inside the spaceship, Broly, naked, scratched his round belly and muttered to himself. "Besides Earth and Namek, what other planets are there in the Dragon Ball world? I can't remember. It seems like Dragon Ball Super added a lot of new settings, but after hearing that Goku and Frieza teamed up, I lost interest in watching it. While forgiving enemies is a common practice in the world of anime, isn't it a bit exaggerated that you two could forgive each other after such a huge feud? If it were me, I would definitely kill the other person, let alone join forces with them. I just hope he doesn't end up in some god-forsaken place with explosive combat power, and that he can develop peacefully." 1498 in the Haiwan calendar. East China Sea, Rog Town. "Do you want my treasure?" On the execution platform, Roger's voice pierced through the rain, "If you want it, you can have it all. Go find it. I've left everything in this world there. Execute him. Execute him immediately." Zhang Guo's expression changed drastically, and he roared fiercely, the veins on his forehead throbbing. The executioners on both sides moved in response, their sharp spears piercing Roger's body. However, the next second, a thunderous cheer erupted from below the execution platform, the sound almost shaking the entire town of Rogue. The Warring States period clenched his fists tightly. Far away in Mary Gosa, the 5 elders, who witnessed this scene through a video den mushi, also crushed their teacups in the shadows. Damn Roger, so that's why he turned himself in. In the crowd, Doflamingo licked his lips, his eyes filled with madness. Mihawk stood with his hands behind his back, his hawk-like gaze as cold as a knife. Crocodile frowned as he looked at the stage, his expression inscrutable. Even Monkey D. Dragon stood deep within the crowd, his gaze somber. These people, who will one day stir up the sea, each have their own thoughts at this moment. Just then, the dragon suddenly looked up at the torrential rain-soaked sky and exclaimed in a low voice, "What is that?" Whoosh! Whoosh! The sound of flames burning came from overhead, getting closer and louder. The cheering crowd looked up and saw a meteor engulfed in flames, cleaving through the torrential rain and trailing a long fiery tail, hurtling straight toward Logue Town. Chapter 2. Meteorite. The 2 words struck everyone's hearts like a thunderbolt. The sphere, wreathed in flames, tore through the rain and hurtled straight toward the square of Logue Town. As the highest-ranking naval force present, Sengoku suddenly unleashed a dazzling golden Buddhist light. His burly body expanded dramatically, his military cap and shirt instantly shattering, and a golden giant Buddha, several meters tall, rose from the ground, the complete release of the human fruit, mythical Zoan type, Buddha form. Shockwave. With a roar, the Buddha-like Sengoku unleashed his broad right palm, slamming it forward to meet the meteorite. The deep roar made the air vibrate. A mere meteorite? Watch me push it back with the power of the Buddha. Under the watchful eyes of countless townspeople, as well as young powerhouses like Mihawk and Doflamingo, the golden palm strike collided violently with the burning meteorite. A violent shockwave swept across the square, overturning all the townspeople who had been cheering for Roger's treasure just 10 seconds earlier. Sengoku gritted his teeth, thinking to himself, the power of this meteorite is truly astounding. General! We've come to your aid. The naval forces unleashed their combined attacks, raining down long-range strikes like finger guns and storm kicks upon the meteorite. Among them, the most powerful was Borsalino, who was then a vice-admiral and still under Sengoku's command, and who possessed the glint fruit ability. The 8-foot jade curved jewel. The 30-something Kizaru had a lazy smile on his lips, not creepy, but rather a unique nonchalance. He leaped into the air, crossed his arms, and made the signature OK sign with his index finger and thumb. Countless light particles burst out from between his fingers like a meteor shower, and dense photon energy blasts slammed into the side of the meteorite. Bang! A deafening explosion ripped through the air, and the meteorite shattered completely under the combined attack of gold and light. This time, the shockwave didn't just knock over the crowd, it directly blew all the onlookers in the square away, and even caused cracks to appear in the pillars of the buildings. Amidst the smoke and dust, Monkey D. Dragon, Doflamingo, and the others' pupils constricted. What had fallen were not meteorite fragments, but clearly charred metal debris. What is that? It's not a meteorite at all. Before the words were finished, a small figure crawled out from the pile of wreckage in the flickering firelight. The entire venue fell silent, even the world watching the live broadcast via video den mushi was plunged into silence. It turned out to be a child who looked to be 2 or 3 years old, naked, with a fluffy tail swishing behind him. Among the flowers of Mary Gosa, little sister Im stared intently at the screen, her eyes deep and thoughtful. Having lived for nearly 1,000 years, she had never seen such an absurd sight. A lively little child fell out of the meteorite. Broly was no less shocked than anyone else. Previously, he recognized the Dragon Ball world through his Saiyan armor. Now, Sengoku's marine uniform and the devil fruit power in the form of a Buddha all point to an absurd fact: he has not only traveled through time, but has also fallen from the Dragon Ball world into the One Piece dimension. Did we arrive on a new planet, or did we transmigrate again? Broly was bewildered. Could it be that all two-dimensional worlds belong to the same dimensional universe? This outrageous idea popped into his head, yet it somehow felt strangely reasonable, since everyone belongs to the anime/manga world. Click click click. A piercing metallic clang rang out, and the execution platform behind Broly began to deform from the impact. In just 2 seconds, the massive steel platform that had executed the Pirate King collapsed in half and hurtled toward Broly. Be careful! In the crowd, 7-year-old Smoker shouted at the top of his lungs. Boom! The execution platform crashed to the ground, raising clouds of dust. Everyone thought the long-tailed baby was a bloody pulp, but when the smoke cleared, a horrifying scene unfolded. Broly raised his chubby little arm and steadily supported the steel execution platform weighing several tons, then with a casual flick of his wrist, the entire giant platform crashed to the side with a thunderous roar. He tilted his head, looking curiously at Roger's corpse on the ground, muttering to himself, "Ah, it's Gold Roger, the Pirate King. Oh, no, it should be King of Suppression." Broly couldn't help but laugh out loud at the meme-filled plot he'd seen before his transmigration. What a pity! I wanted to ask him what he was thinking, why he had to steal his brother's woman. Pop po! Sengoku's portable den mushi suddenly rang. He snapped back to reality, and the moment he answered, the 5 elders' cold voice came through, "Sengoku, bring that baby back." Sengoku's heart sank. He knew all too well what the world government was thinking. This child's innate superhuman strength will inevitably make him a subject of their experiments. After all, Kaido of the Beasts and King the Wildfire were both kidnapped by the world government for experiments due to their special physical characteristics. Sengoku could easily bring himself to capture adult pirates like Kaido and King, and he could even convince himself that capturing ordinary civilians was for the sake of making the world a better place. But he just couldn't bear to look at a 3-year-old child. On the other end of the den mushi, seeing his hesitation, the 5 elders' tone suddenly sharpened. "Sengoku, do you intend to disobey the world government's orders?" Sengoku shuddered, gritted his teeth, and stretched out his giant hand to grab Broly. He thought the other person would be scared, and even managed a reassuring smile, but the next second, the whole world witnessed an unbelievable scene. Broly stretched out his short hand and precisely grasped Sengoku's little finger. Sengoku immediately smiled, thinking that his affability had affected the baby. But the next moment, the baby was suddenly flung away. The 278 centimeters tall Sengoku was lifted up like a rag. The difference in size was like a hamster lifting an elephant. Sengoku's expression changed drastically, and before he could react, he was thrown away. At the critical moment, Borsellino transformed into a golden light and caught him just before he crashed into the building. "Mr. Sengoku, are you all right?" Kizaru asked, supporting him with his still languid tone. "And nothing, it's nothing." Sengoku gasped for breath, looking at Broly with lingering shock. What's the deal with that baby?" Kizaru raised an eyebrow, his usual teasing tone replaced by genuine fear. To have such terrifying power at such a young age, how frightening! "How terrifying," was his catchphrase, but this time, there was no mockery, only pure fear. Even Charlotte Linlin, the born destroyer, did not possess such monstrous strength as an infant. The next second, the baby climbed onto Roger's body but did not show any affection. Chapter 3. All eyes were on Logue Town Square. Broly stood on Roger's corpse, showing no embarrassment whatsoever. He casually grabbed a piece of cloth from Roger's body, which was still relatively clean, and wiped himself off, completely oblivious to the deathly silence around him. Cool. He ripped off one of Roger's sleeves, haphazardly tied it around his waist as a makeshift cloth, and muttered to himself, where do I go next? Gurgle. Broly's stomach rumbled in protest, interrupting his thoughts. He patted his belly, remembering the Scion's insatiable appetite. Well, what's done is done, let's eat first. Broly's unsteady gait might seem cute at first glance, but no one in the world thinks that way right now. The townspeople, who were battered and bruised from the two shockwaves, stood up in unison, their eyes filled with the terror of seeing a monster. Meanwhile, far away in Mary Goase, the fifth elder, Masai, had already rushed to the video Den Den Mushi, his roar echoing through the line, Sengoku. What are you standing there for? Grab that kid right now. An infant who looks to be around 3 years old was able to throw a naval admiral flying. Even if the Warring States period was prone to underestimating its enemy, this power was enough to shake the world. If left unchecked, it will pose an even greater threat than Charlotte Linlin. Having personally experienced the horrors of Broly, Sengoku finally suppressed his last bit of hesitation. He was not entirely good. The order to destroy O'Hara 2 years later was also given by him. In this sea of scum, his conscience is merely a little more prudent than others, making him no different from Garp. For world peace, for the safety of the people, please come with me. Sengoku's roar echoed across the plaza, and the golden Buddha statue was activated once more, charging fiercely towards Broly. Broly rolled his eyes. It was exactly the same nonsense Danzo spouted before he died. He raised his hand towards the charging Sengoku, a rich, dark green light emanating from his palm. Sengoku, whose observation haki had instantly reached its maximum, sensed an intense aura of death from that chubby little hand. The body rolls over before consciousness. Bang! A green light tore through the air, swept past Zhangguo, and crashed into the buildings at the edge of the square. Boom! Amidst the deafening roar, rows of houses were blasted open like paper, with cracks spreading all the way to the coast of Rog. Suddenly, huge waves hundreds of meters high surged up the sea, and a towering curtain of water blotted out the sun. Doflamingo's eyes behind his sunglasses were almost bursting out of the lenses. At that moment, he had only one thought in his mind: are the national treasures hidden by the celestial dragons really that powerful? Mihawk's black sword, Yoru, hanging at his side, trembled slightly. This supreme-grade sword, symbolizing the pinnacle of swordsmanship in this world, was in danger at this moment. The 4 Emperor's crew, who witnessed this scene through a video Den Den Mushi, were in an uproar. On Whole Cake Island, Katakurivikan's lips trembled with fear. Mom, can she really do this? The Charlotte children around him remained silent, already knowing the answer while their mother was terrifying. The power in the video was beyond words. Kaido of Onigashima was frozen in midair with his hand holding the wine jar, completely unaware that the wine had spilled all over him. Faced with a powerful opponent, the strongest creature, who should have grown stronger with each battle, was now only filled with a chilling aura. This brat, he's not even human. Marco of the Whitebeard Pirates pinched his thigh hard, and the pain confirmed that he was not dreaming. He looked in the direction of his father, Whitebeard, and saw that the tall figure was also staring at the Den Den Mushi screen, his large hand trembling visibly. Having narrowly escaped death, Sengoku stared at the gaping hole that pierced through the town, his mouth agape in an O shape. When he came to his senses, his voice trembled. Such terrifying power. We cannot allow you to run rampant outside, you must be subject to the jurisdiction of the Navy and the world government. He charged at Broly again, but as soon as he took a step, he fell heavily to the ground, looking utterly pathetic and completely different from his earlier imposing figure. What happened? A heart-wrenching pain instantly swept through his entire body. When Sengoku turned his head, he was horrified to find that the right half of his body, his right hand, right foot, and even his right chest and abdomen had vanished without a trace, leaving him with a full 40% missing. He dodged it, but not completely. A heart-wrenching scream echoed across the square. The whole world was stunned. One move was all it took to bring a naval admiral to such a state. Protect Mr. Sengoku. Kizaru abruptly abandoned his usual laziness, his face turning ashen, and he sternly commanded the naval soldiers. The soldiers in white rushed forward and hurriedly lifted Sengoku, who only had half a body left, onto a stretcher. But everyone knew that the Navy's only admiral was not going to survive. The square, where hundreds of thousands of people had gathered, was now deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Doflamingo swallowed hard, unable to even let out his signature fu-fu-fo laugh, only to be secretly alarmed. This ocean is about to boil over completely. No, it's about to be completely overturned by this brat's power. After Sengoku fell, Kizaru became the highest-ranking marine present. He felt Broly's gaze sweep over him, and large beads of sweat slid down his cheeks, his back already soaked with cold sweat. Even when he followed Sengoku in the great battle between Roger and Shiki, he had never felt such fear. The indifference in his eyes made it seem as if everyone present was just an ant that could be crushed at will. Broly's target has shifted from Sengoku to Borsalino. After learning about the Celestial Dragon's actions at God Valley, he already had no goodwill towards the Navy, so he naturally showed no mercy in his attack. The dark green light in his palm shone again, even brighter than before. The whole world was stunned this move could actually be used repeatedly. Kizaru instinctively took 2 steps back, his voice trembling. That technique, it can actually be used repeatedly. He thought of his glint-glint fruit and the extreme speed of his light-speed kick, but in the face of this endless destructive power, speed seemed like a joke. Just when Borsalino was at a loss, a naval soldier could no longer withstand the suffocating pressure, screamed, and turned to run away. This collapse, like hot oil splashed into boiling water, instantly ignited panic in the Navy. Countless soldiers abandoned their armor and fled in a frenzy, just to get as far away from the baby as possible. Their steps faltered, and some even fell to the ground in fear, not even having the courage to turn back, only wishing that their parents had given them 2 more legs. Kizaru's eyes widened in disbelief. Those who participated in this mission were the elite of the Navy. It could even be said that their combat power was no less than that of the main force in the future Marineford War, but at this moment, they were completely defeated when faced with a 3-year-old child. He finally understood that this was no longer a simple matter of difference in strength, but rather the most primal fear that would arise in a lower-ranking creature in the food chain when facing a higher-ranking creature. Chapter 4. Borsalino turned his head, his gaze fixed on the fleeing naval soldiers, his face filled with disbelief. Before he could recover from his shock, a blinding dark green light suddenly swept over him, engulfing his vision inch by inch. Borsalino whirled around the 3-year-old child's chubby palm, emitted that terrifying green light for the 3rd time, and this child, whom the candidate for general was like a devil in his eyes, spoke for the first time, his tone as calm as if stating something insignificant, uttering the name of this move. Omega. In that instant, Borsalino experienced the chilling reality of death for the first time in his life. Even when he intervened in the Battle of Ed War between the Roger Pirates and the Flying Pirates, he had never felt such fear. With the extreme speed granted by the glint-glint fruit, even if caught in a battle between the world's top experts, one can always escape if one cannot win. But at this moment, feeling the terrifying pressure of this power, he knew better than anyone else. His own speed was not enough to escape the reach of this attack. Once this move is made, he will be reduced to ashes in an instant. Wait a moment. A childish voice suddenly broke the deathly silence. In the plaza where everyone was scattering in terror, a boy of about 7 years old with grey hair suddenly rushed between Broly and Borsalino, raising his arms to block in front of him, and roared, "Stop! I understand you're fighting back because Sengoku wants to grab you, but if you use this move, innocent Marines on the island and countless residents of Logue Town will die. They're innocent. Please, stop." Broly chuckled softly as he watched the scene unfold before him. This scene inexplicably reminded him of the famous scene where the Deserter King stopped Akainu, but the white-haired boy's words actually made some sense, unlike the deserter king's nonsense, which only made people laugh. Could this kid be? Broly blinked, vaguely guessing his identity. The light on his right hand, which had almost dyed the entire sky green, gradually dimmed. Noticing this change, Crocodile, Doflamingo, and other powerful figures who were desperately fleeing in the opposite direction all turned around and stared in astonishment as the green light in the demon child's palm completely dissipated. He had really stopped. The group of future Shishibukai looked on in disbelief, yet they all breathed a sigh of relief. Even if they escape in the opposite direction, no one can guarantee that this attack won't sink the entire island. Moreover, most of them are ability users, and if they fall into the sea, their fate will be unimaginable. Young Smoker was also bewildered. He acted impulsively, driven by his inherent sense of justice, seeing that this attack was about to kill half of the people in Logue Town, without considering the consequences. After shouting those words, he was even prepared to die, but he never expected that the devilish child opposite him would actually stop. Equally shocked were Shanks and Buggy, the remnants of Roger's pirate crew, who were just about to slip away in the chaos. Buggy clutched his head, staring intently at Broly's retreating figure, muttering to himself, "Really? Really? That kid actually stopped." Shanks swallowed hard, his voice low, "Perhaps he's not as ruthless as we think. After all, everyone saw that Sengoku tried to capture him first, and that's when he retaliated. Maybe, he's quite kind." As soon as he finished speaking, Shanks suddenly turned around and walked towards the center of the square. Bucky broke out in a cold sweat, "Hey! Shanks, what's wrong with you?" Shanks, without turning his head, said, "Captain Roger's body is still there, I'm going to take him back for burial." "Are you fucking asking for it?" Bucky couldn't help but swear, Captain Roger's body was only 2 or 3 meters away from that monster. "You dare go and grab it? Does he think he can't see it?" Shanks didn't respond, but kept running towards the body. Bucky gritted his teeth and followed after them, grumbling all the while. Although it was because of Shanks that Buggy accidentally ate the chop fruit, he constantly says, "I must kill Shanks." But these two are definitely best buddies. If one sees the other in danger, the other will never stand idly by. Moreover, Bucky's admiration for Roger has always been genuine. If Broly hadn't appeared, Roger's remains would have been taken by the world government, something he was powerless to change. But Broly's withdrawal just now gave both of them a sliver of hope. This kid might actually have some principles and be able to take the captain's body away. Clinging to this sliver of hope, the red and blue duo crept stealthily toward the body. Just as he reached out to lift his hand, Broly's gaze swept over him. The two froze instantly, each managing to force an awkward yet polite smile. "Haha. Excuse me, sorry to bother you. I'm Bucky the Clown." Bucky, true to his Joker persona, waved and grinned at Broly, while Shanks chimed in with a silly grin, "We left something behind, grab it and go, right away." The two future Yonko, at this moment, meekly carried Roger's body, wanting only to pretend that nothing had happened and turned to flee. As they moved, the two of them silently repeated the same sentence in their hearts, "You can't see me, you can't see me, you can't see me." But just as he was reciting it for the third time, bang! A dark green laser beam, only the thickness of a finger, suddenly struck from behind, piercing Bucky's forehead with pinpoint accuracy. Thump! Bucky fell straight to the ground, without any reaction, and died on the spot. Shanks, carrying the body, stumbled, his pupils shrinking as he stared at his best friend on the ground with a bloody hole in his forehead, too shocked to speak. He abruptly turned to look at Broly, who was holding up a single index finger, his eyes indifferent yet slightly mocking. Shock, anger, and confusion swirled in Shanks' eyes. He stood frozen for a full half-minute, until his throat went dry with emotion, before he finally asked in a trembling voice, "Why, why?" Broly withdrew his finger, and in response to his questioning, simply uttered 2 words, fun. The extremely simple answer caused the expressions of the powerful individuals who remained in the square or hadn't yet fled far to change drastically once again. These 2 words were more terrifying than any harsh words. Fun. Shanks repeated the 2 words, his shock and confusion instantly swallowed by overwhelming rage. You killed Buggy for this reason? The words almost burst from his throat, but the future Yonko knew better than anyone, if he lost his temper now, if he attacked this monster, he would only follow in Buggy's footsteps. He used all his strength to suppress his raging anger, carried Roger's body on his back, and then lifted Buggy's body with one hand, dragging his heavy steps toward the sea. He was even prepared Broly could fire another laser at any moment and take his life. What puzzled everyone, including Shanks himself, was that Broly didn't move an inch until he carried the 2 bodies out of the square. Chapter 5. 2 minutes later, Shanks, carrying Roger and Bucky's bodies, finally escaped the plaza and staggered into the street. But only 3 words remained in his mind. Why? He couldn't understand why the devil, who could kill Bucky without hesitation, would spare him. Foolish Shanks! A childish voice suddenly rang out, like a death knell from hell, clearly penetrating the ears of everyone who hadn't yet escaped far. Shanks abruptly stopped, his face filled with horror. That devil knows me? Broly's voice, tinged with nonchalant mockery, drifted over. If you want to kill me, hate me, resent me, then live an ugly life, constantly running away, barely surviving. Come find me when you have the same power as me. No, the power to touch me. These words were like red-hot nails, driven deep into Shanks' mind, destined to become a nightmare he could never shake off for the rest of his life. Right now, Shanks had neither the mind nor the time to delve into the matter. He had only one thought: to escape with the bodies of his captain and best friend and survive. He carried the 2 heavy bodies and fled desperately towards the dock. Just as Broly had said, at this moment, he could only rely on his sole obsession with survival to keep running away. On the other side of the plaza, the future Shishibukai had long lost interest in watching the spectacle. Even the red-nosed one died tragically on the spot. No one dared to gamble that the monster might get carried away with killing and wipe out those hiding in the shadows as well. Borsellino was the same. The second Broly withdrew his power, he turned into a golden light and made a hasty escape, not even bothering to take the young smoker with him. In just a few minutes, the huge Logue town square was left with only Broly and Smoker. Young Smoker stared blankly at the empty square, standing there in a panic. Should he run away too? Gurgle. Broly's stomach suddenly roared in protest. Just as Smoker was about to turn and run away, he heard the sound and turned back. He saw Broly frowning, his little hand touching his round belly. Smoker, who knows where he got the courage, actually spoke up. Are you hungry? How about coming to my house to get something to eat? Broly raised an eyebrow and glanced at the other man with interest. An hour later, at Smoker's home. Looking at the mountain of empty plates on the dining table, Smoker's worldview completely collapsed. He stared at Broly's almost flat belly, his mind racing. Where did all that food go? Clang! Broly put his spoon down on the empty plate and looked up at Smoker. Smoker immediately understood what he meant, scratching his head awkwardly. We're out of ingredients. I was stocking up on enough for a week, but there's probably no one at the market now, so I can't buy any new ones. Broly licked his lips, his tone nonchalant. It's fine, being half full is enough. Smoker was speechless again. Does that mean the stronger a person is, the more outrageous their appetite? At this moment, Broly suddenly rested his chin on his hand and looked him over with great interest. You've got some nerve, daring to stop me in that situation. Smoker paused, scratching his head somewhat embarrassedly. I didn't think that much at the time. I just thought that if you used that move, those fleeing soldiers would definitely not survive, and so many families on the island would be torn apart, and then I acted impulsively and rushed forward first. As he said this, the boy's face was full of awkward embarrassment. This appearance would never have appeared on him 20 years later, when he had become a vice admiral in the navy. Quite righteous, that's rare. Broly gave him a thumbs up, the mockery in his eyes fading slightly, but still carrying a hint of amusement. It was this pure and undisguised sense of justice that made him choose to stop just now. After all, in this messed up world where beasts and scum are everywhere, people like this are extremely rare. Smoker was taken aback again. Was this a compliment? Broly suddenly changed the subject, as if he had remembered something amusing. Oh right, as payment for this meal, I'll give you a heads up if you ever eat a devil fruit in the future, prioritize mythical Zoan type. If you get a Logia type, choose something with high power like thunder or magma. He knew all too well that the reason Smoker would appear less and less in the future was largely because the power of the smoke fruit was too weak and couldn't keep up with the times. Of course, there was another reason that he found even more interesting. He had to make way for that deserter king. After all, the more Smoker upholds justice, the more he makes Oda's favorite son, the deserter king, seem like a joke, which is hilarious to think about. Smoker was completely dumbfounded. The topic had jumped way too fast. He had only been practicing martial arts for a short time, and hadn't even thought about whether to use fists and feet or swords, let alone devil fruits. Before he could react, Broly had already jumped off the chair and was about to leave. Are you leaving? Smoker asked quickly. Broly didn't turn around, his voice carrying a casual chuckle. You're a pretty upright kid, you'll probably be a marine someday. If people see you hanging out with me, wouldn't that hinder your progress? Smoker stared at Broly's small figure and felt that this guy, who was 4 or 5 years younger than him but kept calling him kid, was truly unfathomable. Based solely on their brief time together, Broly doesn't seem to be inherently evil. Yet he could kill that red-nosed guy who seemed to have done nothing wrong without hesitation. Smoker was completely baffled, unaware of Broly's true reason for killing Bucky. The thought that Red Nose had committed countless atrocities in his early years, yet managed to rise step by step to become one of the 7 warlords of the sea, and even approach the throne of one of the 4 emperors, and perhaps even become the Pirate King, made Broly think that the plot was ridiculously interesting. When I was a kid, I just found the red-nosed guy's luck in the comics funny. But looking back after being a corporate slave in my past life, I just feel disgusted. Many people abide by the law their whole lives, so why should those scumbags and prodigals who turn over a new leaf be able to sit on equal footing with them, or even live better lives? Ugh, disgusting. As for telling Shanks it was fun, it was because he was too lazy to talk nonsense and genuinely thought it was fun. This guy has a special identity. He's a celestial dragon, a future Yonko, and has entanglements with the world government. Keeping him around is like keeping a firework that can explode at any time. Life will definitely not be boring from now on. Marine Headquarters, Marine Ford. The Marshal's office was in complete chaos. They were watching everything that was happening in Logue Town through the video Den Mushy. When they heard Roger's shocking last words, the Naval High Command wanted to slap themselves. Damn it, no wonder Roger surrendered himself, he was waiting for them here. The inherently evil pirate, old ghost. But what alarmed them even more was the appearance of Broly. This reminded them of Charlotte Linlin, who was only 6 years old when a bounty of 5,000 million berries was placed on her head. But this brat in front of me is 100 times more terrifying than Charlotte Linlin. Judging by his age of no more than 3 years, he killed Admiral Sengoku with a single move. The destructive power of his Omega move far surpasses that of any of the 4 emperors of the sea, and even the former king of the sea, Rox, is probably hard to match. What sent chills down their spines even further was that the brat's every move showed no anger or hatred, only a nonchalant air of amusement. It's as if killing Sengoku, blowing up the square, and killing Bucky were just amusement for him to pass the time. The current fleet admiral, Steelbone Kong, immediately ordered an emergency meeting, summoning all officers of the rank of Rear Admiral and above to the highest conference room. A more violent new era is about to begin. Chapter 6. Marineford. Aside from the king of deserters and his blonde henchman whose name Broly could no longer recall, almost all the senior naval officers who would participate in the Marineford War were gathered in the VIP conference room. Branyu, who had just turned 30, had already earned the title of King of Meetings. Seeing that Steelbone Kong nodded to him, he first pinned Broly's photo to the blackboard and said in a deep voice, "Everyone. This mysterious boy who was born from a meteorite, let's call him Demon Child for now. This person's strength is unfathomable. You all witnessed the live broadcast of the Den Den Mushi just hours ago. To possess such terrifying power at such a young age, his threat level is more than 100 times that of Charlotte Linlin back then." To this end, his colleagues in the bounty department discussed the matter overnight and have already drafted a bounty order for him. As he spoke, Branyu pulled a wanted poster from his pocket and pasted it on the blackboard. In the photo, Broly looks disdainful, his chubby little hand raised high, seemingly gathering energy for the camera. I don't know how the Navy took this photo, perhaps this guy is a user of some kind of rule-based devil fruit. What truly shocked everyone was the number below the photo, 50 billion berries. Even a powerful figure like Kuzan couldn't help but gasp when he saw this number. Looking across the ocean, only the late Roger and Whitebeard Edward Newgate could claim this bounty. Going back further, there is only Lox, whose name has been erased from history. It was already absurd that a 3-year-old child would have a bounty on his head, let alone 50 billion berries, yet not a single officer present dared to object. After all, this child killed a Sengoku general in one move. Such combat power is something even rocks might not be able to achieve. Kuzan, who had not yet experienced the O'Hara incident, still had a bit of impulsiveness in his personality and couldn't help but say, "Setting a bounty is useless. I'm afraid no bounty hunter will dare to actually take his head. In the end, we still have to rely on our navy." After a brief pause, he pressed on, "Then how should we deal with him? Should we gather all the navy's forces to surround and capture him? If we just leave him alone, the navy will lose face." "Calm down, Kuzan." Vice Admiral Tsuru, who was resting his chin on his hands, spoke in a deep voice. His knuckles were white from the force he used to support his chin. "Don't be fooled by his appearance and age. When dealing with an enemy like him, you must be fully prepared. At the very least, you should find out what his abilities are." Tsuru, Sengoku, and Garp were close friends who joined the navy at the same time, and their deep friendship needs no further explanation. She was one of the angrier people when the Warring States period suffered this calamity, but the angrier she was, the clearer she knew that she must not lose her composure at this moment. Garp remained silent throughout. Normally, this old rascal would lean back in his chair and doze off during meetings, but now he had his head down, his face as dark as ink, and no one knew what he was thinking. Steelbone Kong nodded in agreement. He is right. The strength this kid showed in Logtown shows that numbers are meaningless in front of him, they will only die in vain. First, ascertain his abilities. If he is a power user, find a way to force him into the sea, if not, assassination is far safer than a direct confrontation." Sakazuki replied, his tone still ruthless yet clear-headed, "Gathering intelligence is not the Navy's forte, it's more appropriate to leave it to the CP department." Even he was intimidated by Broly's strength when he saw it with his own eyes, and he knew that he had no chance of winning in a head-on confrontation. He was just being aggressive, not stupid. Rather than sending the Navy as cannon fodder to test the waters, it would be better to let the world government take action. He paused, then said, "The sudden appearance of this monster must be a headache for the higher UPS. I don't think they'll refuse it." Everyone nodded in agreement. The Navy's investigation was nothing more than sending cannon fodder to test Broly's abilities, but the enemy could wipe out the entire group with a single beam of light, so they couldn't find any useful information at all. It's clear that the CCP is more professional at these kinds of conspiracies and tricks. Seeing that the topic of Broly had come to a temporary halt, Meeting King cleared his throat, then let's move on to the next topic. Less than 5 hours have passed since Roger's execution, and according to reports from various branches, over 200 new pirate crews have emerged. I don't need to elaborate on the reasons, do I? Upon hearing this, the faces of the senior military officers in the conference room turned ashen. No matter how terrifying Broly is, he is ultimately an extraterrestrial visitor and has little connection with the Navy. Roger's move was undoubtedly a blatant attempt to make a fool of the Navy and the world government. Steelbone Skybreaker made a decisive move, immediately launch an emergency global recruitment drive. Regardless of age, anyone willing to join the Navy will be accepted. Any talented young people discovered will be immediately sent to the Naval Academy at headquarters for training. Zephyr will be in full charge of this matter. Zephyr has been serving as the chief instructor of the Naval Academy for 10 years since he resigned from his position as admiral. Over the past decade, he has personally trained a host of naval backbone members, including Sakazuki, Borsalino, Kuzan, Momonga, and Fire Mountain. His teaching ability is beyond doubt, and Steelbone Sky can rest assured when it comes to entrusting recruitment and training to him. Then, Branyu raised the next issue. With the death of the Sengoku Admiral, there is no admiral in the Navy headquarters, which greatly damages the Navy's prestige. After some discussion, the group decided to give the 3 monsters of the middle generation of the Navy, Sakazuki, Borsalino, and Kuzan, the codenames Akainu, Kizaru, and Aokiji 10 years ahead of schedule, and promote them to the rank of admiral. With their abilities, the 3 of them were more than capable of handling the task. They were just lacking in experience and merit. However, it is absolutely unacceptable for the Navy to be without a senior admiral at the helm, so an exception must be made to promote one. With the discussion temporarily concluded, Cyborg Kong stood up. I'll head to Mary Gioase now and report to the 5 elders on the investigation into Demon Child. No need. Before he could finish speaking, the conference room door was suddenly pushed open, and a tall, thin man in a suit walked in with several men in black suits. He looked arrogant and didn't take the naval experts in the room seriously at all. Steelbone Sora and Tsuru recognized him at a glance. Shpondam, the highest-ranking officer of CP9. What is CP9 doing here? Our naval meeting isn't over yet. Steelbone Sky questioned with a dark expression. Shponda himself was utterly incompetent, but because he was the head of a department directly under the 5 elders, he never took the Navy seriously. However, he wasn't stupid enough to deliberately break off relations. He pulled a document from his pocket and said indifferently, the 5 elders have issued a supreme order, requiring the Navy to arrest all pregnant women and newborn babies after the disbandment of the Roger Pirates, including married women. These words left the entire room of Marines bewildered, except for Garp, whose expression changed drastically, but he quickly suppressed his emotions. Why? Kong couldn't help but press. The number of pirate crews worldwide has exploded, and the Navy's forces are barely enough to suppress them. How can we waste so many resources on this? Spandane said calmly, according to the latest investigation by CP, Roger most likely left behind offspring. Upon hearing this, all the officers changed color again, but Garp silently lowered his head, and no one could see his expression at that moment. If Broly were here, he would probably sneer. For the sake of his nemesis's son, he was willing to sacrifice the lives of countless pregnant women and infants. He truly deserves to be called a naval hero. Chapter 7. As soon as the horizon began to lighten on the second day, hundreds and thousands of newsbirds flapped their wings and poured out from newspaper offices all over the world. They carried newspaper bags on their backs, filled with neatly arranged newspapers, whenever they saw ships sailing on the sea or inhabited islands. They would throw the newspaper in a conspicuous place with a thud, and then flap their wings and fly away. Such a gesture of distributing newspapers for free can only mean one thing on the entire ocean: a momentous event, powerful enough to shake the world order, has occurred. After all, Morgans, the owner of the World Economic Herald, was a notorious miser. If the world government hadn't covered all the costs, how could that stingy man have been willing to part with them? Today's newspapers have their front page filled with bold black text: no age limit, no background inquiry, global recruitment. The document clearly states that anyone, regardless of age or gender, who wishes to join the Navy can register at the nearest naval base. Those who are exceptionally talented and pass the initial test will be specially dispatched by the Navy headquarters to the Naval Academy in Marineford for further study. The second page, however, was completely dominated by an exaggeratedly large bounty poster. He has no name, only two strikingly powerful characters: Demon Child. The figure in the bounty column is even more dazzling: 50 billion berries. This string of numbers exploded like a thunderclap across the entire ocean. On Cake Island in the New World, Charlotte Linland's hand, which was holding a dessert, suddenly tightened, smearing cream all over her hand, and she squinted her bloodshot eyes. On Kaido's Onigashima, sake jars shattered on the ground. The captain of the Beast's pirates, holding a sake jug, tilted his head back and took a swig. His scarlet eyes swept over the newspaper, and he sneered, 50 billion? I really want to see this kid in person. In a bar in the Sabayati archipelago, Rayleigh stared intently at the contemptuous face of the infant on the wanted poster, muttering to himself, Bucky, the new era hasn't fully arrived yet, how come you're already? Even Boa Hancock, who was not yet 10 years old and lived on the island of Dwarf in the Calm Belt, stared wide-eyed at the newspaper her younger sister handed her. A 3-year-old child, whose name, background, and abilities are all unknown, has a first prize of 5 billion berries? Anyone who saw it for the first time would think that the world government had gone mad. But as soon as they recalled the major event in Rogtown yesterday, the deep ditch that was so casually blasted out and ran across the entire town, everyone fell silent. This number is damn reasonable. This is the town of Rogue at this moment. In the middle of the street, a scene that could shatter anyone's worldview was unfolding. A medium-sized warship capable of holding 100 people was floating a full meter above the ground. If anyone dared to lie down and take a closer look, they would find that the bottom of the boat was not empty. A small figure was curled up there, its chubby arms and legs taut, carrying the enormous vessel on its back, jogging at a leisurely pace. The figure was Broly. His short legs moved alternately, but his steps were as steady as if he were taking a walk. He didn't even pant. He had been running for more than 3 hours since 4:30 in the morning. On the 3rd floor of the naval base, the highest-ranking colonel in Logtown clung desperately to the window frame, staring at Broly on the street, his eyes practically bulging out of their sockets, muttering under his breath, "Monster, monster." Before he finished speaking, his gaze swept over the natural barrier not far away. The colonel shut his mouth in frustration, feeling that the scene before him seemed quite reasonable. "Colonel." The adjutant behind him swallowed hard. "That kid has already been designated a pirate by Marine headquarters. Are we just going to watch him like this?" The colonel turned around abruptly and almost slapped his deputy. "Damn it! Are you hoping I die so you can take my place? We just received encrypted instructions from headquarters this morning. This matter is now under the direct control of the world government. The Navy is to remain inactive for the time being. Anyone who dares to act without authorization will face the consequences." The colonel barely suppressed the urge to curse and said irritably. The adjutant and the soldiers standing around him instantly felt as if they had been granted a pardon, and they all breathed a sigh of relief, cold sweat streaming down their faces. "Thank goodness! We've escaped unscathed. With the resources of our Rogue town, going up there would be like offering ourselves up as food. The world government must have some backing. They probably have a lot of ruthless characters comparable to generals hidden away, which is why they dare to provoke that monster." Young Smoker was also standing near his own window, completely unaware of what was happening. Watching Broly jogging with the warship on his back, he muttered to himself, "Damn it! He's already this strong, working himself to the bone like this, how are ordinary people supposed to survive? Smoker will never know that Broly's relentless training wasn't about becoming stronger at all. Even if he lies still, his strength will grow exponentially day by day. What he truly fears is repeating the mistakes of the original story. In the original story, Broly possessed the invincible power of a legendary Super Saiyan, but because he never deliberately trained and allowed his body to grow wildly, he would lose control and become a madman who only knew how to destroy once he transformed. It's like a preschooler getting a legendary weapon, Broly thought as he ran, his mind racing. Power can only be controlled by oneself, and I don't want to become a slave to power. He doesn't want to be acting like a headless fly when he becomes a Super Saiyan. But speaking of which, in the original work, is Broly's super legendary form considered a berserk state? Unlike Naruto and Ichigo Kurosaki, who completely lose their minds and transform into monsters that attack indiscriminately when they go berserk, he is still capable of speaking and thinking. It's more like the awakening of a second personality, a bit like Luffy in Nika's form. Thinking of this, Broly's face darkened even more. If he had to choose, he would rather choose the former. But no matter what, he still hoped to be able to control this power himself. The clock hands finally moved to 8 o'clock. Broly glanced at it and thought that the weight training should be enough. He stopped, raised his chubby little hand, and tossed the 100-person warship into the air like a baseball. With a whooshing sound, the enormous ship instantly turned into a small black dot and disappeared into the horizon. The townspeople, who had been secretly watching from inside the house, fell silent once again. Broly dusted off his hands, looking completely unconcerned. Anyway, this ship is a pirate ship that was stolen from the dock yesterday. He swung his short legs and turned into the nearest restaurant. The moment the door was pushed open, the once bustling restaurant fell into a deathly silence. The waiter's plate slammed to the ground, and the owner, who was keeping the bill, turned as white as a sheet. Broly didn't care. Amidst the horrified gazes of everyone in the room, he found a table, sat down, and loudly proclaimed, "Boss, bring me breakfast for 50 people. I'll pay you back now, and I'll give you a pirate's head to exchange for the bounty later." The shop owner snapped out of his daze, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace, his voice trembling uncontrollably, "And no charge. It's my honor to serve you." He gave the kitchen staff a fierce look and yelled, "What are you all standing there for? Get to work." The cooks in the kitchen were busy at work, and before long, plate after plate of food was piled up on Broly's table. Bread, sausages, milk, bacon, piled up like a small mountain. Broly was too lazy to explain to the boss that he really would pay back the money, so he grabbed the food and stuffed it into his mouth, his cheeks bulging like a hamster, wolfing it down. After all, ever since the King of Suppression shouted, "My treasure is right there," the entire ocean has been in chaos. The lives of ordinary people are as fragile as paper. At any moment, mad pirates could massacre the city for money or women. Didn't Bucky do that back in the day? Whether this small restaurant will survive until he comes back to pay back the money is really hard to say. Normally, Broly would be full after eating breakfast for 50 people. But today, after practicing for 3 hours, his stomach felt like a bottomless pit, and he ate a full 70 servings before finally letting out a loud burp while rubbing his slightly bulging belly. "I start my long-distance run at 4:30 in the morning, have breakfast at 8 o'clock, read until 12:30, and then take a 1-hour nap." Broly smacked his lips and leaned back in his chair, muttering to himself. This turtle hermit style of routine was something he had tried to imitate and memorize when he was a kid watching Dragon Ball. Unfortunately, he couldn't stick to it for more than 2 days before finding it too hard and going back to bed to sleep. With his current physical condition, getting up at 4:30 in the morning to exercise is a piece of cake for him. But the mere thought of the word reading made Broly roll his eyes and shout out Li Yunlong's classic line, "Read? Read my ass." Chapter 8. Broly hadn't walked far from the restaurant when he stumbled upon something new to amuse him. In front of an inconspicuous little house, a farce was raging. The slender pregnant woman, with her noticeably protruding belly, gripped the man's arm tightly in front of her. The man was dressed in shabby clothes, his cheeks were flushed, and he was carrying a bulging cloth bag in one hand and shaking a half-empty bottle of rum in the other. "Don't go! Please don't go!" The pregnant woman's cries were broken and fragmented. "I don't care if you drink, I really don't care. Don't become a pirate, what will happen to me and the baby if you leave? Get out of my way," the man snapped, swinging his arms impatiently, his breath reeking of alcohol in the pregnant woman's face. "I'm going to see. I'm going to be the freest man in the world. Once I find One Piece, you and your daughter can enjoy your retirement. Enjoying a life of leisure." The pregnant woman cried even harder, her voice filled with despair. "You can't even beat a thug at the tavern, and you used the last of your belly to buy a ship. The sea is full of man-eating pirates and sea monsters, it's hard to say whether you'll even come back alive, and you're still talking about the One Piece." Broly scratched his chin, leaning against a street lamp, looking on with great interest. He had seen many such scenes along the way. Many hotheads, around the same age as Luffy, the chosen one of this world, are carrying their parents' or families' hard-earned money and ignoring all advice to go to sea in droves. They are just like those reckless teenagers who stole money from their families and raced cars late at night in my previous life. They all think they are very awesome, but they all end up dying. So annoying. The man, having been hit where it hurt, pushed hard. The pregnant woman staggered backward, about to fall onto the rough stone pavement, when a small figure suddenly rushed out. "It's Smoker." He steadied the woman and asked worriedly, "Are you all right?" The pregnant woman had barely managed to mumble a thank you when she turned around and saw her husband staggering away, leaving only a blurry silhouette. She collapsed to the ground, crying and reaching out, "Don't go, come back. I'm going after him." Smoker gritted his teeth, about to lift his foot, when a dark green laser whizzed past his face, the sound of it cutting through the air sharp and piercing. Before Smoker and the pregnant woman could recover from their shock, the laser beam pierced the man's forehead with pinpoint accuracy. It was exactly the same way that Pakistani died yesterday, lying in the square. The man fell straight to the ground, and Barry rolled out of the sack, clattering and rattling on the stone slab. "Freedom, what a convenient excuse." Broly scoffed, his eyes filled with disgust as if he were looking at trash. From the restaurant to here, he has seen many fools who, in a moment of impulsiveness, shout freedom and set sail. These two words are the most he hears. This reminded him of Luffy, the chosen one of the world, who loved to shout, "The Pirate King is the freest person on this sea." These despicable people speak with great righteousness, but in the end, they just want to do whatever they want and commit all sorts of evil deeds. Smoker finally snapped out of his shock, jerking his head toward the direction from which the laser had come, his voice trembling, "Demon child, why did you do this?" "What?" Broly's brow furrowed instantly. The image of an ugly brat from a movie I'd seen in a past life immediately popped into my mind. "What did you call me? I'm way more handsome than that kid, okay? I'm asking you why you killed him." Smoker almost roared as he questioned him. Broly glanced at him like he was an idiot. "He wants to be a pirate. You're a future Marine, you should be thanking me, right?" Smoker was speechless for a moment. If it were 20 years from now, he might be able to find some arguments to refute it, but now, at the age of 7, he simply can't come up with a single decent sentence. The pregnant woman standing nearby was terrified and collapsed to the ground, forgetting even to cry. She just stared blankly at the corpse on the ground. Smoker hesitated for a long time, but couldn't find a rebuttal to Broly's words. He could only point in the direction of the pregnant woman and ask, "Then, what about her? Without her husband, how will she and the baby in her belly survive? What does this have to do with me?" Broly gestured with his chin towards the cloth bag on the ground. "At least this money is still in their hands, rather than being stolen by that beast." Smoker paused for a moment, then quickly ran over, picked up the bag, and handed it to the pregnant woman. After taking it, the woman didn't even say thank you, and stumbled back into the house, slamming the door shut. Smoker didn't pay attention, but his mind was still in turmoil. That man was certainly a scoundrel, but he had never actually been a pirate before, and he was killed just like that. Wasn't that going too far? Thank you. Smoker finally thanked Broly, his face flushed. After all, Broly had at least offered a slightly better solution. You seem to have misunderstood something, Broly's voice suddenly rang out. I didn't take action to help that woman, I just couldn't stand this kind of trash who uses freedom as a moral high ground. To be honest, in this messed up world, Broly doesn't think being a pirate is anything special. After all, the Navy does not protect non-member states at all, not to mention that many naval personnel are not even present for duty. But if you choose to be a pirate and then insist on erecting a whole bunch of moral high-minded facades, that's a bit disgusting. Broly paused, then added, and don't think she'll live much longer. Smoker's expression changed drastically. Does this devil even prey on pregnant women? Seeing that Broly showed no intention of chasing after him, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. However, a wave of doubt surged in his heart, and just as he was about to ask, Broly spoke first, by the way, what did you call me just now? Smoker paused, then asked, didn't you read today's newspaper? Seeing that Broly's brows furrowed even more, he pulled a yellowed newspaper clipping from his pocket. It was Broly's wanted poster. Only 50 billion. Broly glanced at the number, his face full of dissatisfaction. Based on what I did yesterday, it should be worth at least 100 billion pesos, right? Smoker was completely dumbfounded, his expression exactly like a husky's mim. Good heavens, 50 billion is still not enough? Don't you know the name? Why didn't you ask? What a terrible nickname you gave yourself. Broly scoffed and casually tore the bounty poster to shreds. He turned right, heading straight for the naval base in Logue Town. Smoker was startled. After hesitating for 2 seconds, he gritted his teeth and followed. The two privates at the base gate caught a glimpse of Broly and were so frightened that their legs went weak and they fell to the ground. They couldn't even shout stop, and could only watch as he swaggered into the gate, their bodies trembling like leaves. After passing through the gate and arriving at the training ground, a large number of naval personnel quickly discovered the uninvited guests. Like the guards at the gate, everyone froze on the spot, cold sweat streaming down their foreheads. They didn't even have the courage to look Broly in the eye, let alone stop him. Only one person gritted his teeth and pressed the alarm. His naval number and name Monka were written on his badge. Beep beep beep. The piercing alarm sounded throughout the entire base. Soon, the naval captain stationed in Logue Town arrived with a group of key personnel. Even though he was the highest-ranking officer here, when facing Broly, he could only grip his sword tightly, his brain suffering from severe oxygen deprivation due to tension, and large beads of cold sweat splattered onto the ground. What do you want to do? He bit his tongue hard, forcing himself to keep his voice steady, but all he felt was despair. This devil is finally going to make a move against the Navy. Today, the Navy in Logue Town will probably all be buried here. Broly said with a sour face, change the name on my bounty poster. Chapter 9. What? The naval captain standing at the very front suddenly contracted his pupils, and his jaw dropped dramatically, almost to the ground. The soldiers around them, who had just been so frightened that their legs went weak and they almost fainted, stood there dumbfounded and incredulous. Broly frowned slightly and repeated, contact your headquarters and change the name on my bounty poster. Broly couldn't think of a suitable nickname right away, so he said, just write Broly, use my own name. Smoker, who was following behind Broly, was slightly taken aback when he heard this. At that moment, he realized that he did not know the other person's name. The naval captain was still in shock, his mind replaying, so, he broke into the base just to change the name on the bounty poster. Although this colonel was of average strength, he had served in the Navy for more than 20 years and had dealt with countless pirate incidents, but he had never encountered anything so unbelievable. Seeing that he hadn't made a move, Broly grew increasingly impatient. "Don't make me say it a third time." The colonel snapped back to reality and stammered, I'm just a colonel, I don't have the authority to contact headquarters directly. I can only contact the branch on the Grand Line first, and then the branch will relay the message upwards. It will probably take more than a week to get the message to headquarters." He knew in his heart that agreeing to the devil-named Broly's request was the best course of action at this moment. But given his mere rank of colonel, he had no right to speak directly with Marineford. Broly paused slightly, then turned to look at Smoker behind him, whose expression was complex. It has become clear that although the future Smoker was only a colonel when he first appeared, he was able to contact headquarters directly. The reason for this is simply that Smoker, as a Logia-type smoke fruit user, is more than capable of serving as a major general, but he was probably demoted to the East Blue because of his upright personality. Ordinary colonels do not have this privilege. After a moment's thought, Broly asked, "How long does it take to get from here to Marineford?" The colonel had clearly not expected Broly's problem to be so far-fetched, but dared not conceal anything. "If we do not make too many stops along the way and the weather is stable, we can arrive in about 15 to 20 days. Broly nodded, his tone still calm. "All right, prepare the warships, I'll go talk to them." Upon hearing this, the Marines present were once again stunned. In order to change the name of the bounty, a pirate was actually going to Marineford alone. Was there something wrong with their ears, or had the world gone mad? Bulu, Bulu, Bulu. Just then, the colonel received a phone call in his pocket. Broly raised an eyebrow, gesturing for him to answer the call. The colonel reluctantly took out the Den Mushi and pressed the answer button. The Den Mushi, which had been keeping its eyes closed, suddenly opened them and mimicked the serious expression of the caller, saying, "Hello, it's me, Lieutenant General Doberman." The colonel replied in a trembling voice, "Lieutenant General Doberman, what are your orders?" Doberman's voice came through the Den Mushi, carrying the sharp edge characteristic of a hawkish general. "We're on our way to the East Blue. We'll be selecting talented new recruits to go to the Naval Academy at headquarters to receive guidance from instructor Zephyr. Have you found any promising new recruits in your jurisdiction?" Broly then interjected, "Let him come over." The colonel dared not disobey and could only hurriedly reply, Yes, Lieutenant General, yes." On a warship sailing on the Grand Line towards the East Blue, Doberman nodded upon hearing this, then remembered something and asked, "By the way, is the demon child still in Logue Town?" When he said this, Doberman's tone still carried a hint of fear. The colonel glanced furtively at Broly, who raised his hand in a gesture of acknowledgement. He swallowed hard, suppressing the panic in his voice, and replied, He left yesterday." Upon hearing this, Doberman breathed a sigh of relief. Even though he was a well-known hawk in the Navy, adhering to absolute justice by wiping out all pirates, he was unwilling to confront that monster directly. After hanging up the call, Doberman was in high spirits and shouted to his men, "Full speed ahead! Head to the East China Sea!" Upon learning that Broly had left, the morale of the 1,000 soldiers on the ship soared. They had been terrified when they received orders to go to the East Blue to recruit people, since they all knew that the demon child was in Logue Town in the East Blue. After the call ended, Broly turned and left the naval base, leaving hundreds of naval soldiers and the colonel slumped to the ground, utterly exhausted. After a long pause, the colonel murmured, I thought I was going to die here." The adjutant beside him, drenched in sweat and still shaken, asked in a low voice, "Colonel, is that monster really heading to headquarters? For something so trivial?" The colonel quickly covered the adjutant's mouth, lowering his voice to say, "Idiot, are you out of your mind? Do you want him to hear you?" The scene fell silent instantly, everyone held their breath, fearing that Broly might return. Half an hour later, after confirming that Broly had gone far away, the colonel finally breathed a sigh of relief. Let him do whatever he wants. An opponent of this caliber is far beyond our ability to contend with. If he really tries to storm headquarters, we still have at least a general-level fighter to deal with him. But as soon as he finished speaking, the colonel felt something was wrong. After all, hadn't Sengoku, who was also a general, been killed in an instant just 2 days ago? Broly had been waiting at the harbor in Logue Town for 3 days, patiently awaiting the arrival of Doberman's warships. Because he had been stationed here for the past 3 days, many young pirates who were influenced by Roger's last words and wanted to go to sea to become pirates did not dare to make any rash moves, for fear of being targeted by Broly. Doberman. Broly sat on the dock muttering to himself, and after a moment he finally remembered this man was a naval hawk and a follower of Akainu. The reason he remembered Doberman was because of the future battle of Egghead Island. One of the spider elders unleashed a deadly glare, leaving Doberman in a state of uncertainty about his fate. Thinking of this, Broly's lips curled up slightly, revealing a contemptuous smile. I thought I was so awesome when I transformed, but all I did was kill an ordinary soldier and severely injure a lieutenant general. When I was young in my past life, I read comics and always thought that the 5 elders who always held closed-door meetings were incredibly powerful. But in the end, I found out that they were all fucking idiots. From the moment he made his move until he was killed by Im, he killed 2 of his own people, and one of them might not even be dead yet. This reminded Broly of the Konoha elders F4 from the Naruto world, who were also subservient to outsiders but ruthless to their own people. All stupid leaders are the same. As soon as he finished speaking, a dark shadow appeared on the opposite horizon and continued to grow larger. He stared intently at the large warship. Its sails were painted with the Navy's iconic gull, with the word Marine printed below, and the word Justice prominently displayed on the other sail. Upon seeing this, Broly chuckled again. On the deck of this warship, which could hold 1,000 people, Doberman sat in a chair, wiping his sword with an alcohol swab, a smug look on his face. He said, "Ha ha ha, with Demon Child gone, I am invincible." When he first received this mission, he was trembling with fear. Everyone knew that the Demon Child was in Logue Town in the East Sea. Now, he received a report from his subordinates that the Demon Child had left, and he went wild on the spot. At that moment, a soldier standing on the lookout tower on the mast spotted Broly and cried out in alarm, "Lieutenant General! It's that devil! The Demon Child is there!" Doberman, who was wiping his sword, suddenly jerked his hand, and the sword fell to the ground with a clatter. The next second, Doberman didn't bother to pick up his sword. He rushed to the bow of the ship and looked up to see Broly sitting cross-legged on the dock, looking right into his eyes. Doberman was so shocked he made a meme-worthy face. What happened? Didn't they say he was already gone? But the surrounding navy was already terrified and no one answered his question. Immediately afterwards, Broly vanished as if he had never been there. The next second, a child's voice came from behind the group, "Take me to Marineford." The sailors turned around abruptly, nearly snapping their necks. Broly was sitting with his legs crossed in the chair that Doberman had just been in, leisurely basking in the sunlight. All the Navy personnel were sweating profusely. How did he get up here? I didn't see him at all. Chapter 10. On the deck of the warship, 1,000 sailors remained silent, trembling with fear. Even Lieutenant General Doberman of the headquarters was frozen in place, his mind in complete chaos. Given his hawkish nature, he should have roared and led his men to attack. However, they had clearly seen Broly's swift and decisive defeat of Admiral Sengoku during Roger's execution a few days prior, all through a video den mushi. Sending this small crew up there was practically suicide. Just as Doberman was at a loss, a clear boy's voice suddenly came from the dock behind, "Sir, he's going to headquarters to change the bounty poster." Everyone turned their heads in unison, only to see a 7 or 8-year-old white-haired boy standing on the dock, looking up and shouting. Doberman paused, then asked, "Change the bounty? What do you mean?" Meanwhile, Broly lay lazily in Doberman's chair, glancing at the people on the ship. Besides Doberman, the unlucky guy who will be tormented to the point of not knowing whether he lives or dies by his scumbag boss, he also caught a glimpse of an unexpected figure, a little girl of about 5 years old with pink hair, who stood out from the Navy men in their formal uniforms around her. "Why are you looking at Tina?" The little girl noticed Broly's gaze and timidly took 2 steps back. Upon hearing this timid question, Broly immediately remembered. Isn't this the female marine who will have a somewhat ambiguous relationship with Smoker in the future? I remember he was a user of the cage fruit, which allows him to create iron cages, and he was in the same Navy class as Smoker, so it's not surprising that he appeared on this ship. On the other hand, Smoker expressed his desire to join the Navy, and Doberman, seeing that he seemed to know some inside information, let him board the ship. Smoker quickly explained the whole story to everyone, and all eyes turned back to Broly. Is this kid out of his mind? Everyone thought the same thing, but no one dared to say it aloud. No wonder they were surprised. It's outrageous that a pirate would go to Marine headquarters alone just to change the nickname on his bounty poster. Doberman was caught in a dilemma again. Logically, he shouldn't obey the pirate's orders. But the problem is, the logic is now in Broly's hands. "Lieutenant General, don't mess with Broly." Smoker lowered his voice and reminded him, "It will take more than half a month to get to Marineford from here. You can report to your superiors along the way." Doberman's eyes lit up, and he glanced at Smoker a couple more times. This kid's pretty clever. Little did he know that Smoker's suggestion wasn't based on cleverness, but rather on a slight understanding of Broly than others. He will generally not make a move unless you show hostility. You absolutely cannot attack him, that's the bottom line. Having made up his mind, Doberman ordered his adjutant, Bastille, turn back to the Grand Line and head to headquarters. Broly followed Doberman's gaze to the Major General. A burly man over 2.5 meters tall, wearing a coat with the rank of Major General. He suddenly remembered that this was the Marine who lost to Sabo in the Dressrosa arc and wore the bullhead mask. It seemed he was only a rear admiral at the moment. Doberman had originally planned to scout for Naval Academy candidates from other bases in the East China Sea, but given the current situation, he had no interest in doing so. At dinner time, the Navy officers in the mess hall were all stunned. The empty plates next to Broly were piled up like a small mountain. Is he a pig? 5-year-old Tina couldn't help but mutter a complaint under her breath. Just as she was speaking, Broly finished another dish, casually tossed the empty plate onto the mountain, and waved to the cook serving the food, "Another bowl, please." The cook was numb and mechanically handed over the plate full of food. Broly buried himself in his food, while the cook muttered under his breath, "With this much food, will the ship's supplies last until the Grand Line?" Apart from Smoker, all the Navy personnel were astonished by his appetite. While he was at it, Doberman secretly slipped out of the mess hall and went to the deck to make a phone call. Soon, the Den Mushi opened its eyes, and the voice of Marshal Kong came through, "Hello, Doberman." As a lieutenant general, Doberman had the authority to contact generals or even marshals directly, but he spoke in a flustered tone as he quickly recounted what had happened that day. Upon hearing this, Steelbone Kong, far away in Marineford, widened his eyes in astonishment. That kid's coming to headquarters. To be honest, he was almost used to seeing pirates storm Marineford alone. Before Broly this year, 2 other people had done the same thing. Roger surrendered himself, and Shiki the Golden Lion was the one who caused chaos in Marineford because of Roger. Steelbone Sky was practically cursing. "What do you pirates take Marineford for? A public toilet? You come and go as you please." But at least the first 2 had a legitimate reason, unlike Broly's nonsensical reason. Just as Cyborg Kong was in a daze, Doberman's voice came again, "Marshal, what should we do now?" Steelbone Space was also in a dilemma. Having learned from Roger's experience, he was genuinely afraid that this kid named Broly was hiding some earth-shattering conspiracy. Even without any conspiracy, if he really gets to Marineford, what if he throws a tantrum and kicks Marineford out? That would be terrible. After a long silence, Kong replied, "You stall him for now. I need to report this to the 5 elders." Doberman could only reply, "Yes, Marshal. I will try to delay him as much as possible on the way, hopefully without arousing his suspicion." Kong nodded, then remembered something else. "By the way, when we pass through Alabasta, bring those people on board and send them back to headquarters. They're all people the world government wants." Upon hearing the words "those people," Doberman's face darkened, but he ultimately gritted his teeth and agreed, "I understand, Marshal." 2 days later, in the afternoon, the warship arrived at Reverse Mountain, the only way for the 4 Seas to enter the Grand Line. At this time, the Navy had not yet recruited Vegapunk, nor had it invented a new type of warship with sea stone polished and plated on the bottom of the ship to prevent Sea Kings from approaching. Therefore, the warship could not travel through the Calm Belt and could only cross Reverse Mountain to enter the Grand Line like an ordinary pirate ship. Smoker and Tina looked up at the upside-down mountain that seemed to pierce the sky, and the reverse current rushing from the foot of the mountain to the top, and couldn't help but swallow to relieve their inner tension. The currents at Upside Down Mountain were terrifyingly swift, causing the ship to rock violently. Many soldiers lost their footing and fell onto the deck, staggering about. 5-year-old Tina fared even worse. With every rocking motion of the boat, her little legs would lift off the deck, leaving her floating in mid-air. "Everyone hold on tight to whatever you can. Be careful not to get thrown off." Doberman shouted a warning. "Wah!" Broly, who had been lying in the chair that originally belonged to Doberman, opened his eyes, yawned, and opened them from Doberman's chair. After so many days of cultivation, his biological clock had been established, and his afternoon nap was over. When I opened my eyes, I saw the warship about to roll over the top of the upside-down mountain. "It's time to begin the afternoon's practice." After muttering to himself, Broly suddenly jumped off the stern amidst the incredulous gazes of all the Navy personnel. "Is he insane?" Everyone's heart skipped a beat. Tina, with her short legs, clung to the stern railing and looked down. She saw Broly lying on the sea, his hands pushing against the stern and his feet kicking hard into the water. Tina had only one thought in her mind: is he even human? The next second, the warship seemed to be equipped with a rocket booster, its speed suddenly soaring to over 200 km per hour, turning into a blur as it sped across the ocean currents of the upside-down mountain. The sailors on deck were completely terrified, their souls nearly left their bodies. Chapter 11. A few hours later, before the morning mist in the East China Sea had completely dissipated, Broly, covered in seawater, jumped back onto the deck of the warship with a thud. Doberman was completely numb, yet he could still push the warship forward at sea at a speed comparable to that of a vice admiral running on land. The journey from Logue Town to Marineford, which would normally take half a month to 20 days, will probably only take him 4 or 5 days to reach headquarters. Before he and Steelbone Kong could even get started, their stalling tactics were about to be shattered. However, Doberman did not come away empty-handed. Broly pushed the ship for 2 days, but he felt that this amount of training was not enough. So he tore off the anchor, tied it to himself, and plunged into the sea to tow the warship. Doberman was now convinced, this kid is definitely not a superhuman. After all, who has the ability to stay in the sea and still do things like they've been given a cheat code? Marshal. This is a monumental discovery. After feeling frustrated for several days, Doberman took advantage of Broly's nap while hugging his pillow and snoring at night to quickly pull out his Den Mushi to report, his tone as excited as if he had found 100,000 berries. The Den Mushi mimicked Kong's furrowed brows, remained silent for a few seconds, then suddenly launched into a tirade, "You idiot! What's so funny? It just means that seawater and sea stone are completely useless against him. Steelbone, far away in Marineford, slammed his hand on his desk, cracking the surface, and cursed Doberman's ancestors in his mind. What kind of things are they raising? Doberman's smile froze, and he was stunned for a moment before he finally reacted, swallowing hard. Okay, that seems to be the case. So what do we do now, Marshal? At this rate, we should be at headquarters in 3 days at most. Have you discussed it with the 5 elders and come to a decision? Cyborg scratched his balding head, his teeth aching with anxiety. The next place to pass by is Alabasta, right? You'd better waste a few more days there. I'll go urge the 5 elders again. Damn it, that brat Broly, he's a surprise every day. Isn't the nickname Demon Child quite fitting? Why change it? He even considered having Doberman hand him the Den Den Mushi and yell at Broly, I'll change your nickname, so please don't come here, but he was afraid of provoking the brat's rebellious spirit. You think I won't come just because you tell me not to? I'm coming anyway. If things really escalate to that point, things will only get worse. At 9 o'clock the next morning, Broly finished his morning training, which was being conducted according to the Turtle Hermit School training method. The warships have entered Alabastus waters. This is a superpower in the first half of the Grand Line. In terms of land area and population in the tens of millions, it ranks among the top in the Grand Line. However, in the eyes of powerful figures like the admirals and the 4 emperors, the number of people is just a number. Doberman steeled himself and walked to the bow of the ship, clearing his throat to draw everyone's attention. We'll be staying in Alabasta for a few days to replenish supplies and carry out an important mission. Basti, you lead your squad to guard the ship until we return. After saying that, he turned to Broly hesitantly, even stammering his address, that. Demon, oh no, Broly, what do you think? If Broly is unwilling and insists on leaving, even all of them combined cannot stop him. Fortunately, Broly was sprawled on a recliner flipping through a newspaper, his short legs dangling, waving his hand as if shooing away flies. Do as you please. Doberman breathed a sigh of relief. He could only wait it out for as long as possible. After Doberman led the main force off the ship, the 100 or so sailors left on board dared not utter a sound. The deck was as quiet as a funeral, and everyone was afraid of making any noise that might offend that ancestor. 7-year-old Smoker huddled in a corner of the ship's railing, doing one-handed push-ups. His arm was shaking like a leaf, but he didn't stop. Having witnessed Broly's monstrous training methods these past few days, he knew he might never catch up in his lifetime, but he still gritted his teeth and continued training. On his way from Logue Town, he saw no fewer than 10 pirate ships, and Broly wiped them all out. But this kid's method of killing is really something else. He no longer just fires a cannon and kills the pirate quickly. Instead, he drags the warship around like a cat chasing a mouse, driving the pirate to a mental breakdown before slowly taking action. He only bites the mouse to death after he's tired of playing with the cat. Smoker has no sympathy for pirates. What he fears is that one day this method might fall on the Navy, or even innocent people. Even if the hope is slim, he has to become stronger. Broly flipped through the newspaper. Today's headline was that Gecko Moria, known as the hero of the West Blue, had formed a large pirate crew and begun his march toward the Grand Line, repeatedly claiming that he was the one who would obtain One Piece and become the Pirate King. They didn't mention Roger at all, Broly muttered to himself. According to the timeline, the Navy and the world government should have taken action against O'Hara's orphans by now. But that's not surprising, such a dirty matter wouldn't be reported in the newspapers. The Turtle Hermit School's reading time is from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., and the amount of newspaper content is not enough for him to read. Broly looked up at Tina beside him and asked, "What time is it?" "It's not even 9:30 yet." After spending a few days together, although she was still afraid, Tina appeared much calmer than when they first met. Broly clicked his tongue, crumpled the newspaper into a ball, and burned it to ashes. Boring, let's go for a walk. When they saw Broly get up and disembark, Bastiu and the other navy men turned pale, but none of them dared to utter a word to stop him. Only after Broly's figure disappeared into the yellow sands of Alabasta did Bastiu's hand tremble as he dialed the Den Den Mushi, Lieutenant General. Broly has disembarked. What do we do now? Let him be. Doberman's voice carried a sense of resignation. What's the use attitude? Do we have any other choice? The Marines on the other end of the Den Den Mushi were completely silent. Tina couldn't help but interject, but we can't just let him wander around aimlessly, can we? What if he goes crazy like he did in Logue Town? Smoker gave Tina a strange look. He wasn't exactly insane back then, was he? The whole world was watching. It was the Warring States period that tried to capture him first, but in the end, things just got a bit too big. Upon hearing Tina's voice on the other end of the phone, Doberman paused and then asked, "So what do you think we should do?" He didn't expect this 5-year-old girl to have any brilliant ideas, but he was really out of ideas and thought that maybe the child's brain circuits could come up with some insights. Let's sneak up on them. Tina's eyes sparkled. Being recommended by her hometown to the Naval Academy, this little girl was indeed quite clever. She had already noticed that Doberman and the others were always secretly observing Broly, trying to figure out the details of his power. Following him might uncover the secret of his abilities. Doberman was silent for a few seconds, then finally relented. "Okay, you go." If adult soldiers were sent to follow them, they would definitely suffer a terrible fate if they were discovered. If it were a child, he might have shown mercy. However, when Doberman said this, he completely forgot that Broly was 2 years younger than Tina. Chapter 12. One day later, in Albania, the capital of Alabasta. This megacity, with a permanent population of over 2 million and a garrison of 300,000 royal troops, was enveloped in an unusual atmosphere. Street vendors selling jujube tea were still calling out their wares, but Broly was squatting on the stone steps in front of the palace, his short arms holding up a rough ceramic cup. Inside was jujube tea, with a sweet and slightly bitter taste. His round cheeks puffed out, making some busta girls who didn't know him want to tease him. Looking ahead, Doberman, leading hundreds of naval soldiers, was blocking the palace gates, confronting Nefertari Cobra, the current king of Alabasta and Vivi's future father. The citizens of Albania crowded to both sides of the street, peering around, and no one noticed that the walking 50 billion berries was also mixed in with the crowd watching the spectacle. No one noticed that there were 2 small, stealthy figures following Broly behind him, but he pretended not to see them all day. After taking his last sip, Broly darted around the legs of the onlookers and soon found himself at the front of the confrontation. Navy personnel in white uniforms and Alabasta soldiers in loose Arabian-style robes stood on either side of the crowd. The most eye-catching figures in the crowd were a group of pregnant women with large bellies, and palace maids holding swaddled babies in their arms, looking at their newborn infants who were only a few days old. Seeing this, Broly's lips curled into a mischievous smile, and he muttered to himself, "Oh, so it's finally starting." Compared to when Luffy set sail, Cobra hadn't yet reached the point of having a full head of white hair and being in a wheelchair. He was still in relatively good spirits, though his brows were furrowed. He said to Doberman in a deep voice, "Vice Admiral, as per the Navy's requirements, we've gathered all the pregnant women and newborns from this year here. But, what do you need these women and children for?" Doberman glanced at the throng of citizens outside the palace and lowered his voice, "Too many people, let's go inside and talk." Cobra had some doubts, but dared not disobey. He raised his hand and gestured please, leading Doberman and the Navy into the palace. Just as the 2 groups of people, carrying pregnant women and infants, were about to step into the palace gates, a guard suddenly shouted, "Children, no entry." The moment the word child left his lips, Doberman shuddered and turned around abruptly. Broly was holding an empty jujube teacup, being stopped at the door by a sentry who stared at him with wide, round eyes. Instantly, Doberman and the hundreds of sailors behind him were so frightened that their legs went weak and they almost fell on their butts. Cobra stared at Broly for 2 seconds, recognized the face on the wanted poster, and was so shocked that he couldn't close his mouth for a long time. Broly looked indifferent and shrugged, just joining in the fun, okay. Cobra swallowed hard, not daring to ask Doberman's opinion at all. Fearing this menacing figure might cause trouble in Albania, threatening the entire capital, they hurriedly waved to the guards, "Let him in. Let him in quickly." Upon entering the royal palace, Cobra and the ministers who recognized Broly didn't dare to breathe loudly, the only sound in the palace was the soft patter of their footsteps. Once everyone was in position, Cobra cautiously began to speak, the words barely out of his mouth, "That demon. His name is Broly," Doberman shouted before he could, cold sweat beading on his forehead. Cobra quickly changed his tune, his tone extremely respectful, "Mr. Broly, would you like a seat?" To be honest, even if Broly were to sit on his throne right now, he wouldn't hesitate. Broly glanced at the king. In the original story, this old man was a formidable character who blocked the 5 elders and I don't know how he did it. I feel like even the 2-man team that could hold off 7 beasts in the Naruto world, like Might Guy and the other 2, aren't as powerful as him. Broly casually tossed the empty teacup outside the hall. The cup arced through the air and landed precisely in a stone trash can dozens of meters away. "No need, I can just stand and watch." Despite saying that, Cobra still had his ministers bring over a chair, which was the best chair available besides the throne. It wasn't luxurious, which shows that Cobra usually lives a simple life. Broly didn't stand on ceremony, plopped down on the seat, swung his short legs, and stared at Doberman like he was watching a circus. Once things had calmed down a bit, Cobra suppressed his fear and turned to Doberman, "Lieutenant General, what exactly do you want us to do by gathering these pregnant women and babies?" Doberman scratched his head, cursing inwardly. In a smaller country, he would have retorted, "It's the Navy's business, what right do you have to ask?" Alabasta is a major contributor to the Heavenly Tribute, and Cobra seems to have a special relationship with the Holy Land group. It's best not to offend them unless absolutely necessary. After struggling for a while, he came up with a completely lame excuse: the Navy has recently developed a new medical examination method to examine these pregnant women and babies, which can be considered a benefit to the public. "Oh? I see." Cobra breathed a sigh of relief, a smile spreading across his face. "So, how long will it take for them to return?" Doberman fell silent. Roger's descendants might be mixed in with this group. Knowing the world government's nature, they think they can go back? Dream on. Pfft. Broly couldn't help but laugh out loud, and all eyes in the hall instantly turned to him. He rubbed his stomach and waved his hand seriously, sorry, I'm professionally trained not to laugh, but I just couldn't help it." Cobra looked puzzled. "Mr. Broly? What's so funny about what we're saying?" Broly laughed even harder, crossing his legs, "King, you're supposed to rule such a large country, haven't you heard the rumors that were making headlines at sea recently?" Cobra's brow furrowed deeper and deeper, while Doberman and the Marines felt a sudden unease, a strong sense of foreboding rising within them. Yet no one dared to stop Broly, and could only watch helplessly as he undermined them. More than a year ago, after Roger disbanded his pirate crew, he spent a long time with a mysterious woman, traveling all over the world with her. Broly spoke slowly, paused, and watched as Cobra's expression changed from confusion to horror before adding, "In other words, during that period, that woman most likely became pregnant with Roger's child. Since the world government couldn't find her, they simply gathered all the pregnant women and newborn babies from that time together. Now you understand." Upon hearing this, not only Cobra, but even the pregnant women standing by the palace changed their expressions, clutching their bellies tightly with fear in their eyes. Cobra was both shocked and furious. He turned sharply to Doberman, his voice trembling, "Lieutenant General. What Mr. Broly said, is true." Doberman gritted his teeth and nodded with a forced smile, "No, that's right. In order to sever the bloodline of the Pirate King, and for the stability and peace of the world, this is a necessary measure." "So you're going to kill all these women and children?" Broly interjected, his tone light but sharp as a knife. Doberman almost broke through the defense. If he weren't outmatched by this kid, he would have chopped Broly into mincemeat. Doberman suppressed his anger and forced a smile that looked more like a grimace as he said to Cobra, "Your Majesty, rest assured, as long as it is determined that these people are innocent, they will be released immediately." Pfft! Broly laughed again, glancing sideways at Cobra. "Old King, based on your understanding of those guys in the government, do you think this is possible? You'd be better off believing I'm Qin Shi Huang than believing they'll release these people." Cobra clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles were frighteningly white. Although he didn't know who Qin Shi Huang was, he felt that Broly was right. Based on his understanding of the world government, he knew that once these women and children were taken away, there was a 99% chance they would be executed without hesitation, eliminating any future trouble. Ah! Suddenly, a pregnant woman screamed, clutched her bulging belly, and rushed frantically out of the hall. That shout was like igniting a powder keg. The other pregnant women panicked and stumbled out, dragging their heavy bodies. The baby in the palace maid's arms was terrified by the atmosphere of panic, and the cries of hundreds of babies suddenly erupted, the sharp cries piercing through the palace walls and even reaching the citizens outside the palace. "What's wrong inside? A child is crying. My child is inside too, is he all right?" The citizens were abuzz with discussion, many of them parents of the baby, who anxiously squeezed towards the palace gates upon hearing the baby's cries. On the outskirts of the crowd, a burly man in a purple robe, leaning on an ivory cane, frowned deeply as he gazed intently toward the palace. Chapter 13. At the palace gates, countless citizens stared in astonishment. The group of pregnant women who had followed the king and navy into the palace just minutes before were now running frantically out of the palace, their faces pale and filled with tears, as if they had lost their souls. Many people with round bellies stepped onto the steps, lost their balance, and stumbled and fell straight down. "Be careful!" The crowd below paled and gasped in shock. In the nick of time, the burly man in purple raised his cane and gently swung it. An invisible force, like a large, strong hand, steadily supported several pregnant women who were about to fall. Inside the palace, the navy, led by Doberman, finally realized what was happening. Nearly 1,000 women had fled, leaving the palace maids standing there helplessly, holding hundreds of babies. Doberman slammed his hand on the armrest of his chair and roared, "Bring them back! Not a single one can escape!" Originally, Doberman, a hawk, wasn't particularly opposed to the world government's decision, but now that the truth has been revealed, he's too lazy to pretend anymore. His soldiers hesitated, their faces showing reluctance. Doberman roared again, "What are you standing there for? Go!" The soldiers gritted their teeth and charged outwards, while the rest reached out to snatch the baby from the palace maid's arms. "They're nothing but a bunch of bandits." Broly's tone was full of schadenfreude. Cobra's face darkened, and he questioned, "Lieutenant General, you've gone too far." Doberman, too lazy to feign politeness, said coldly, "This is an order from the world government. Do you intend for Alabasta to secede from its membership?" Before Cobra could finish speaking, a soldier's mournful scream suddenly rang out from outside the palace. Everyone's expression changed, and Doberman immediately ordered, "Keep an eye on these babies. The rest of you, come with me." When they arrived at the palace gates, Doberman was stunned, and Cobra, who was right behind him, also stood there dumbfounded. Broly strolled over leisurely, continuing to watch the spectacle. The burly man in purple robes was seen protecting a group of pregnant women behind him, holding a cane and a knife. Several bloodied naval soldiers lay scattered at his feet. Who are you? Who are you? Broly and the big man looked at each other simultaneously, their eyes revealing surprise. The burly man immediately recognized the child as the devil child with a bounty of 50 billion berries, while Broly also recognized him as the future Marine Admiral. Fujitora smiled. Doberman, naturally unaware of the situation, smiled and, seeing his men half dead, demanded with a dark expression, "Who are you? A pirate? How dare you attack the Marines?" He smiled expressionlessly, his voice deep and slow, "Passerby." He took another half step forward, leaned on his cane and sword, and pressed, "Lieutenant General, what crime have these women committed that warrants the Navy relentlessly pursuing them like bandits?" How could Doberman reveal the truth? The Navy was planning to eliminate these pregnant women in order to track down Roger's son. He simply drew his sword, his face cold. The Navy doesn't need to explain itself to you when it comes to its business. Seeing that he was unwilling to respond, he smiled and stopped being polite. He slowly drew his staff and knife, turned to the pregnant woman behind him and whispered, "Everyone, run away quickly. I will hold them off here. Arrest them all." Doberman roared and charged at Yuxiao with his knife. A sharp, metallic clang suddenly rang out. The moment the blades clashed, Doberman's knees buckled, and he was shrunk by half a head. Clearly, his strength was far inferior to his opponent's. Doberman was shocked. Where did this monster come from? Broly admitted defeat. After all, the other party could kill Sengoku in an instant, but this strange, burly man could also suppress him, and his pride as a naval hawk was severely hurt. While the two were locked in combat, the other sailors bypassed them and chased after the pregnant woman who had blended into the crowd. Although Albina has many residents, the woman with a large pregnant belly stands out. "Stop!" Before losing his sight, Yi Xiao chuckled and shouted, activating the gravity fruit to blast Doberman away, then unleashed a sword aura with a backhand slash. With a whoosh, the sword energy cleaved straight into a Navy man, and blood splattered instantly. He didn't hold back with this strike, and the soldier was instantly cleaved in two. She smiled, a hint of pity in her eyes, and sighed softly, "Why go through all this?" He spared the lives of the Marines he had previously wounded, but this one strike was a sign of his desperation. "You gave yourself away." Doberman seized the opportunity, transforming into the flawless guy and roaring as he swung his knife from behind. She smiled and blocked the attack with her backhand, but in that brief moment, more sailors grabbed the pregnant woman. Some of them were so rough that they tackled her to the ground. "Ah!" A heart-wrenching scream rang out as a pregnant woman was pinned to the ground by a Marine. Her swollen belly slammed against the corner of a table at a nearby stall, instantly staining the ground red with blood. The Marine hurriedly stood up, waving his hands repeatedly in protest, "It's not my fault." She insisted on running away, "I already told her to stop." This scene completely ignited Yi Xiao's anger. He roared and activated the gravity fruit at full power. With a loud thud, Doberman was slammed into the ground, creating a crater more than 2 meters deep. With a smile, he swung his sword again, and a blue sword aura transformed into the outline of a fierce tiger, roaring as it charged towards the group of Marines. The screams of dozens of soldiers instantly echoed across the square in front of the palace. The people witnessed this bloody scene, screamed in terror, and scattered in all directions. Doberman gritted his teeth and climbed out of the pit, stiffening from the gravity as he shouted at Cobra, "Cobra! What are you standing there for? As a member state, it's our duty to assist the Navy. Those pregnant women." Cobra's face darkened. To be honest, the fact that he didn't order his soldiers to wipe out the Navy was already a favor to Doberman. Just then, Yuxiao's knife slashed down again. Doberman managed to raise his sword to defend himself using his observation haki, but he was still a step too slow. The tip of the sword grazed his face, leaving a bloody gash. With a cold laugh, he questioned, "Is this your Navy's justice? You've been harming innocent women and children, but what about the babies? Despite the excruciating pain, Doberman gritted his teeth and said, "The Navy's justice is none of your business, you ignorant fools." With a furious laugh, he unleashed a flurry of sword strikes, the blade flashing and weaving a tapestry of light, instantly leaving several wounds on Doberman's face. He didn't intend to kill him, he only wanted to extract the truth from his opponent. Ha ha! Broly couldn't help but laugh out loud. In the original work, Doberman had many scars on his face, but it was never explained how he got them. Unexpectedly, because of his butterfly, he was the one who was cut by Fujitora. Doberman, who had been slashed to the ground, was covered in blood, his face a bloody mess. Hearing Broly's laughter, he turned his head and glared at him with red eyes, his anger almost burning through his reason, completely disregarding the difference in strength between the two sides. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! It's all because that kid talked nonsense that things turned out this way. Noticing Doberman's murderous glare, Broly's laughter grew even more rampant. He spread his hands and said, "I was just repeating what you guys did. Why are you glaring at me? Do good people deserve to have guns pointed at them?" Upon hearing this, even the furious Cobra and Yuxiao were stunned for a moment, and in their hearts they both thought, "You call yourself a good person?" Chapter 14. Suddenly, Broly casually raised his hand, and a light blue light emanated from his palm. Before anyone could react, it landed precisely on Doberman, who was covered in blood on the ground. Boom! A deafening explosion suddenly erupted, and a charred crater instantly appeared where Doberman had just fallen. He himself had been blown to pieces, leaving not even a trace behind. With a smile, he stared intently at Broly with his still intact eyes wide open, his expression filled with disbelief, as if the question why was written all over his face. Broly glanced at him and said lazily, "Didn't you want to save those pregnant women and babies? What do you think will happen if these Marines go back alive?" Upon hearing this, not only did Cobra smile, but he also instantly frowned. The truth may be harsh, but it is absolutely true. Let alone Doberman, if even one of these Navy personnel survives, today's events will be reported to the world government. At best, these women and children will be taken back, at worst, Alabasta will be expelled from the ranks of member states. Broly added from the side, his tone completely flat, "If you want the remaining women and children to survive, you'd better get rid of them all quickly." After a long silence, he smiled at Broly and said slowly, "The legendary demon child is kinder than I imagined. You also want to save these innocent people?" "No," Broly answered crisply. Her smile froze instantly, and she couldn't help but ask, "So what are your real thoughts?" Broly curled his lip and pointed in the direction Doberman had disappeared. "He just glared at me, he's already courting death." In his past life, when reading those online novels, he always saw that the male protagonist would be hated and subjected to crazy revenge for just glancing at the villain's woman. At that time, Broly thought that kind of plot was utterly brainless. But now that I'm in the villain's position, I realize that this feeling is fucking awesome. I almost couldn't hold back my laughter. It felt like he'd been speechless more times since meeting Broly than he'd been in the first half of his life combined. The naval soldiers, who were still stunned by Doberman's death, were instantly terrified when they heard Broly's words. They no longer cared about catching the fleeing pregnant woman and ran in the opposite direction. Seeing this, Yuxiao immediately drew his cane sword, about to unleash its gravity on the area. Broly interrupted in time, "You want to crush all those pregnant women to death?" Yi Xiao suddenly snapped back to reality, quickly withdrew her strength, and secretly regretted, "I completely forgot about that." Broly waved his hand and urged, "Make a decision quickly. Either let these Marines get away and come back to catch them, or kill them now and let these women and children live. These are the only two choices." This sounds cruel, but it is absolutely true. After all, this messed up world is inherently cruel. Seeing that many skilled marines were about to disappear from sight, he smiled and gritted his teeth, finally raising his cane sword. The fierce sword energy was released, crushing all the fleeing marines into mincemeat. Gravity Blade, Fierce Tiger. Broly watched with great interest, a smile playing on his lips. The future admiral was slaughtering his own soldiers. This scene was quite amusing. In just 10 minutes, the 800 soldiers that Doberman brought were all wiped out by Yuxiao. When Yuxiao returned after sheathing his sword, his purple robe was already soaked in blood, a glaring red. He raised his cane sword, gazing at his blood-stained face in the reflection of the blade, and muttered to himself, "These soldiers were ordered to hunt down the innocent, but ultimately they were coerced by the world government. Now I have no choice but to kill them all. I truly feel ashamed before the world." Before he finished speaking, Yi Xiao suddenly pointed the knife tip at his own eyes. Cobra and the two figures hidden in the shadows stared in shock, but just as the blade was about to touch their eyes. Ding! A crisp metallic clanging sound rang out. Xiao looked up in surprise and saw a slender finger firmly pressed between the tip of the knife and her eye. His pupils contracted slightly, and he turned his head to look. Broly was floating in mid-air, stretching out his small hand and casually blocking the knife. "Why are you stopping me?" Yi Xiao asked, puzzled. Being blind is a blessing in disguise. There are too many filthy people in this world, and today I have become one of them. Broly flicked his wrist, sending Xiao's cane sword flying, and said disdainfully, "That's nothing but impotent rage. Just because you can't see it, does that mean those filthy things don't exist?" Impotent rage. This was the first time Yi Xiao had heard this term. She paused for a moment, and upon reflection, she felt that every word pierced her heart. Broly continued, "I understand if you don't want to see this filthy world. But don't you want to
वीडियोस बनाने हैं, फिल्मोरा है ना।